First, picture this: a man standing behind a cluttered counter in Las Vegas, casually handling a piece of history worth thousands of dollars, cracking jokes and negotiating like it's the most natural thing in the world. Millions of people watched Rick Harrison every single week on Pawn Stars and believed they had him figured out. Sharp businessman, walking encyclopedia, family man with a great sense of humor and an even better eye for value. But here's the thing about people who spend their lives calculating what things are really worth. The most valuable secrets they carry are almost always their own. Behind every confident smile Rick flashed at that camera, behind every closed deal and every expert he called in, a life was unraveling in ways that no television show could ever fully capture. Lawsuits from the people who loved him most. Marriages that collapsed one after another. A global pandemic that nearly wiped out everything he had spent decades building from nothing. And losses so crushing that no amount of money or fame could soften a single moment of them. This is not the Rick Harrison you grew up watching. This is the full story, the parts that were never filmed, never edited, never packaged neatly for prime time television. By the time this is over, you will understand why the man behind that pawn shop counter carries a weight that most people could never survive. Richard Kelvin Harrison came into the world on March 22, 1965, born to Richard Benjamin Harrison and Joanne Rue Harrison in a family of 4 children: Sher, Joseph, Rick, and Chris, with Rick landing third in that lineup. Tragedy found the Harrison family early, before Rick was old enough to fully process it. His oldest sibling, Sher Joanne Harrison, had been born with Down syndrome and passed away at just 6 years old, leaving a kind of grief in that household that no young child should ever have to witness. Death had already introduced itself to Rick, before most kids learn what the word even means, and that early acquaintance with loss would return to him again and again throughout his life in ways nobody could have predicted. Richard Benjamin Harrison served in the United States Navy, and when Rick was just 2 years old in 1967, a military transfer relocated the entire family to San Diego, California. San Diego became the backdrop for Rick's early years until his body decided to make everything considerably harder. At 8 years old, Rick began having epileptic seizures, and that diagnosis reshaped his entire childhood overnight. No more running around outside the way other kids did. Instead, enormous stretches of time were spent confined to bed, unable to live anything resembling a normal boyhood. What Rick did with all that time stuck indoors turned out to matter more than anyone could have guessed. Books became his entire world. He tore through everything he could find, but one series grabbed him completely: John D. Fitzgerald's The Great Brain, which followed a first calculating, angle-working 10-year-old Utah con artist named Tom Fitzgerald. Something in that character connected with Rick on a level that went beyond entertainment. He also developed deep obsessions with history and physics, particularly the history of the Royal Navy from the late 1700s through the early 1800s. These weren't casual hobbies he picked up to kill time. They were genuine intellectual passions that would eventually become the backbone of his entire professional identity. Rick attended Taft Middle School in San Diego, and that's where his formal education effectively ended, because he dropped out during the 10th grade. To bring in money, he started selling fake Gucci bags on the street for $20 a week. Not glamorous work by any measure, but a clear early sign of the hustler's mindset that would define him for the rest of his life. Always scanning for the angle. Always finding a way to make something out of what most people would dismiss as nothing. April 1981 brought a major upheaval when the Harrison family packed up and moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, not out of ambition but out of necessity, because their real estate business had collapsed. Rick was 16 years old when they landed in that desert city, a dropout with big ideas and very little backing them up. Las Vegas, though, had a long tradition of offering second chances to people willing to work for them, and it turned out to be exactly the right city for someone with Rick's specific first combination of knowledge, nerve, and relentless drive. That same year, Rick's father opened a small 300-square-foot secondhand gold and silver coin shop on Las Vegas Boulevard South, and Rick's encyclopedic knowledge of history made him genuinely useful from day one. When customers walked in carrying old coins or historical artifacts, Rick could provide the kind of contextual depth that made those items feel meaningful and sellable. During the day, he contributed to the shop, and at night he was out repossessing cars, doing whatever the moment required to keep money coming in. That combination of day work and night hustle built the kind of work ethic that doesn't come from motivation speeches. It comes from having no other option. At 17, Rick's life got considerably more complicated when his girlfriend Kim became pregnant. They were both barely adults, and the situation demanded a decision. Rick chose to step up and embrace fatherhood. Tragically, the pregnancy ended in miscarriage, and the couple lost that child before ever holding them. Rick and Kim stayed together through that grief, married in 1982, and on April 27, 1983, their son Corey Harrison arrived, the same Corey who would later become one of the central figures in the family business and on the television show that made them all famous. 2 years after Corey came a second son, Adam. Shortly after Adam's birth, though, Rick and Kim's marriage ended in 1985, leaving Rick a young divorced father of 2. Small boys in a city that never slowed down for anybody. 9 months after the divorce, Rick started dating a woman named Tracy, and after about 8 months together, they married in 1986, with both of them taking on the responsibility of raising Corey and Adam together. The family business kept growing through all of it. 5 years after opening the original coin shop, the Harrisons moved to a bigger location on Fremont Street, a move that reflected genuine momentum. 2 years later, they lost their lease and had to relocate again, another setback in a pattern of them that would have exhausted most people long before this point. Rick and his father had wanted to convert the coin shop into a full pawn operation for years, believing it was the logical and financially smarter next step. But a Las Vegas law from 1955 blocked them. The city only issued pawn licenses in proportion to population, which meant the Harrisons couldn't even apply until Las Vegas hit 250,000 residents. And this is where it gets interesting. They simply waited and watched, ready to move the moment the city crossed that threshold. By 1989, after working through several legal challenges, they secured their pawn license, and that same year the gold and silver pawn shop opened at 713 Las Vegas Boulevard South, just a short distance from the Las Vegas Strip. Early on, Rick and his father focused on specialty sports items and unique historical pieces, but the market made its preferences clear over time, and first, jewelry became their top-selling category by a wide margin. The shop's reputation in Las Vegas grew steadily through the 1990s, and by 2005, the gold and silver pawn shop was lending out millions of dollars annually and generating hundreds of thousands in interest income each year. By 2006, the store had become particularly well known for rare sports memorabilia with compelling histories, behind them including a 2001 Super Bowl ring that had once belonged to football player Brock Williams. The shop also served as a financial lifeline for gamblers who would pawn their belongings just to scrape together enough for gas money home. None of that visibility was lost on the right people. Brent Montgomery and Colby Gaines from Left Field Pictures were visiting Las Vegas in 2008 when the idea for a pawn shop television series started taking shape. They believed the setting was perfect, unpredictable inventory, colorful customers, dramatic negotiations, and the kind of characters who couldn't be written by a screenwriter because reality had already done a better job. After exploring their options across the city, they landed on the gold and silver pawn shop, which had already appeared in a PBS documentary back in 2001, and Rick had actually been pushing for a show about his shop for years. He had appeared in an episode of Insomniac with Dave Attell in 2003, so the camera wasn't new territory for him. The show was first pitched to HBO under the name Pawning History, and HBO passed on. First, the original concept. The format got reworked into something more family-friendly, and the name changed to Pawn Stars, a deliberately playful pun that fit the show's personality perfectly. When it premiered on the History Channel in July 2009, the response from viewers was immediate and huge. By January 2011, Pawn Stars had become the top-rated show on the entire History Channel and the second highest-rated reality show in the country, sitting just behind Jersey Shore in the rankings. Rick, his father Richard, his son Corey, and their larger-than-life friend Austin Chumley Russell had become legitimate television stars, and the gold and silver pawn shop had transformed into a tourist destination that fans flew across the country to visit. The success opened doors that Rick had never imagined standing in front of. On June 7, 2011, his autobiography Licensed to Pawn, Deals, Steals, and My Life at the Gold and Silver hit shelves, and by June 26th of that year, it had climbed to number 22 on the New York Times bestseller list. Rick appeared as himself in an episode of iCarly titled I Lost My Head in Vegas and played an antique store owner in an episode of The Middle. January 2014 brought a national television commercial deal when he became the spokesperson for the Micro Touch One razor. The Harrison name had gone from a Las Vegas pawn shop sign to a nationally recognized brand. That same year his autobiography succeeded, 2011, Rick's second marriage to Tracy ended in divorce. First, his second failed marriage before the age of 50. The following year he announced his engagement to Deanna Burdett, who had also gone through a divorce, and they married in Laguna Beach, California. Through that marriage, Rick gained 3 stepdaughters, Serena, Kiana, and Marissa, and he spoke about them publicly and frequently with what read as genuine warmth. His Instagram posts from those years showed a man who seemed to be finding some stability, spending time with family, and enjoying a life that had started to level out after so many years of turbulence. June 2018 changed everything. Rick's father, Richard Harrison, the old man that millions of viewers had grown to love on Pawn Stars, died from Parkinson's disease, and Rick announced the loss to his more than 245,000 Instagram followers. The History Channel released a statement calling Richard a beloved member of their family and saying they would miss his wisdom and honesty. What that statement couldn't capture was what the loss meant to Rick personally and professionally. His father had been there from the 300-square-foot coin shop all the way through to the nationally famous pawn empire. Losing him meant losing the man who had shaped every chapter of Rick's working life, and it meant carrying the full weight of the family legacy alone from that point forward. Before that grief had any real time to settle, the COVID-19 pandemic hit in early 2020 and created a new kind of damage. Many people assumed pawn shops would thrive during a financial crisis. After all, desperate people need quick cash, and pawn shops provide it. The reality for Rick's business ran directly counter to that assumption. There was a brief surge at the very start of the pandemic, but it didn't hold, and with Las Vegas effectively shutting down as a tourist city, the gold and silver pawn shop lost the foot traffic that had become central to how it operated. Rick partially closed the shop in March 2020, shutting down the tourist-facing section for 30 days, while keeping the loan operation running through a night window around the clock. Rick lowered interest rates on pawned items and gave customers more time to reclaim their belongings, telling a local Las Vegas news station in April 2020 that the city had given a great deal to him and that he always tried to give back. His prediction that the economy would bounce back within 6 months turned out to be wrong. The financial damage the pandemic inflicted on the gold and silver pawn shop was staggering. A business that typically generated over $1 million annually brought in just $37,460 across the entire year of 2020. Decades of work, and COVID-19 had reduced the bottom line to almost nothing in a matter of months. None of that mattered because the personal problems kept piling on. Rick's third marriage to Deanna Burdett also collapsed in 2020, with court papers obtained by TMZ showing that Rick had cited irreconcilable differences over tastes, opinions, and preferences. Rick told TMZ the split was mutual and that he had moved on, while making clear he still considered his stepdaughters to be genuinely his own. The Instagram evidence backed that up. Photos of off-roading trips and father-daughter days continued well after the marriage ended, showing a man who understood that family bonds outlast legal documents. Rick married for the 4th time in 2021, this time to Amanda Palmer, and whatever hope that represented for a more stable personal chapter ahead was quickly complicated by what arrived in February 2022. His own mother, Joanne Rue Harrison, filed a civil lawsuit against him in Nevada State Court. The complaint named Rick, the gold and silver pawn shop, Harrison Properties, Jorick Properties, and others as defendants. The allegations at the center of the lawsuit were serious and, for longtime fans of the show, deeply unsettling. Joanne accused Rick of manipulating her into signing over her 51% ownership stake in the pawn shop while she lay recovering in a hospital after emerging from a coma in the early 2000s at a moment when she reportedly didn't fully understand what she was agreeing to. The lawsuit alleged further that when Richard Harrison died in 2018 and Joanne inherited his 49% share of the business, Rick had never provided her with complete financial records. She claimed she hadn't received a proper accounting of more than $500,000 in cash and silver she first believed her late husband had possessed. Rick had been sending her regular payments of $25,000, but stopped in 2020, and Joanne sought to have those reinstated through the courts. She also filed a temporary restraining order to prevent Rick from selling, moving, or hiding any family assets, and the lawsuit asked for unspecified damages, a full accounting of all business holdings, and a court order stripping Rick of control over her property. Joanne's own words in the filing stated that while Rick enjoyed a comfortable life as a celebrity in full control of the family finances, she was left scared and unsure whether she would have enough money each month to cover medical and personal expenses that reportedly ran as high as $15,000 per month given her age and health conditions. Rick rejected the accusations completely. In interviews addressing the case, he maintained that the allegations were untrue and suggested his 81-year-old mother was being influenced by outside parties pursuing their own interests. He said he had attempted to contact her multiple times in the months before the lawsuit and couldn't reach her, and he pointed out that one of the companies named in the complaint was, in fact, entirely owned by his mother. Whether those explanations satisfied anyone who had long thought of Rick as a straightforward family man is a different question entirely, and the lawsuit left a complicated mark on his public image that no television appearance could easily wash away. But none of that prepared anyone for what January 2024 brought. A neighbor noticed that Adam Harrison, Rick's second son, hadn't been seen since January 17th. When the landlord went to check on him, Adam was found unresponsive, and law enforcement was called on January 19th. Adam was 39 years old. The Clark County Office of the Medical Examiner ruled the death accidental caused by a fentanyl and methamphetamine overdose. Rick announced the loss on Instagram with a photograph of the two of them sitting together at a restaurant, and his caption read simply, "You'll always be in my heart. I love you, Adam Harrison," followed by a broken heart emoji, as if the words had run out entirely. Because they had. Family spokesperson Laura Hervich confirmed on January 22nd that Adam had died from a died, the public to respect the family's privacy as they grieved. Rick released a separate statement calling on the country to take the fentanyl crisis more seriously, which was about as direct a public statement as grief can produce. Corey Harrison posted a childhood photo of himself and Adam on his own Instagram page and wrote that he would always love his little brother. The condolences that flooded in came from fans across the world, and figures including Donald Trump Jr. reached out publicly to express their sympathies. Adam hadn't been a regular presence on Pawn Stars. Corey had explained over the years that Adam simply wasn't interested in being on television. First, at one point, Adam had worked at the gold and silver pawn shop, but he had moved on and built a life as a plumber, away from the cameras and the fame that surrounded his father and brother. His death at 39, caught in the same fentanyl crisis that has claimed hundreds of thousands of American lives, carried the particular devastation of a loss that felt both personal and completely preventable. Through all of this, Rick kept engaging publicly with the political world. He endorsed Donald Trump for president in 2020 and backed Daniel Rodimer for Nevada's 3rd Congressional District that same year. He floated the idea of running for governor of Nevada in 2022 and later suggested a possible U.S. Senate run in 2024, telling reporters that many people in the party had approached him about it and that he hadn't closed the door. In June 2023, during filming of the Pawn Stars spin-off Pawn Stars Do America at Locust Grove, Rick was inducted into the Kentucky Colonels, the highest honor the governor of Kentucky can bestow on a civilian. Today, Rick Harrison no longer works full-time at the gold and silver pawn shop. He has stepped back from the daily grind of the business, appears in Pawn Stars Do America, and spends time with his grandchildren and family in what he describes as a semi-retirement. The journey from a 300-square-foot coin shop to a nationally televised empire took nearly 4 decades of relentless work, personal sacrifice, and more loss than most people accumulate across. an entire lifetime. He buried his father. He lost his son to the opioid crisis. He fought his own mother in court. He watched his business nearly disappear in a single calendar year. There is the Rick Harrison that television built, confident, quick with a quip, always in control, always ready with a number and a handshake. That version of him is real. And there is the version of Rick Harrison that the cameras could never quite reach, the one carrying grief and legal battles and the complicated weight of a life that hasn't followed any clean narrative arc. That version is also real. The full story is messier and harder and more human than a reality show format can ever hold, and understanding both versions together is the only way to understand who Rick Harrison actually is.